This is what happens when an 8-year-old designs a train. Instead of a normal diesel or electric or even steam locomotive, how about we slam a jet engine into a locomotive and run it on the main line? Well, this is exactly what General Electric and Union Pacific came up with after the Second World War in 1948. This is the Union Pacific superpowered fleet. Today, we are reviewing a beautiful Athearn Genesis GTEL veranda or gas turbine as listed on the box. Throughout all this, I'll be mainly focusing on the second version nicknamed the verandas due to the walkway. This is a truly unique locomotive in all aspects, it's just different. Unlike a lot of unique locomotive out there, it does actually work, and it does actually what it says on the tag. My name is Jamie, and I'm here to tell you if it's worth the price tag they charge, and if it's an overall good model. We will be going through the history of the Series 1 and 2 gas turbines, if the model matches up, and my thoughts on why I bought it and if I'm happy with it. If you are interested in more content by me, do like and subscribe to my channel, as I do have a review of the Union Pacific powered by our people SD70 Ace coming up and a layout update. Very good question to start with is, why did Union Pacific even need a train powered by jet engine? Good question, and it all starts with two things, mass and steam engine. Reverse the clock back to 1946. With the war ending, a lot of restrictions had ended, and most importantly, this allowed for rapid dieselization across America. Currently, the new locomotive on the block, which was wowing the railroads, was the new EMD F3, coming up at 1500 horsepower, and it allowed engines to be multiple united. However, Union Pacific had just finished receiving some of the most powerful engines ever built, the 4000 class, or affectionately named Big Boy. The big boys would push 6 to 7,000 horsepower, and this meant to replace it you would at least need 4 to 6 engines to replace it. And this seemed silly to Union Pacific at the time, and according to their mass, it was just simply uneconomical. This was because Union Pacific believed that the cost of locomotives was independent to their power rating, which is somewhat correct and also not. It also contributed to the idea that multiple engines to replace a single steam engine was silly from their point of view. Similar but smaller engines by comparison, and I do mean technically smaller, which is the Norfolk and Western A class and the New York Central's Niagara, which did actually fare very favorably compared to early diesels. And to be fair, many believe they actually did only lose due to creative accounting by EMD. What Union Pacific truly wanted was a super engine that could do what the big boys can do, but even better. This leads us to General Electric, pioneering gas turbines and jet engines in 1948, for building things such as the engines that powered the first generation of jet fighters, such as the F-86 Sabre or the F-84 Thunderjet. They agreed with Union Pacific to build a prototype of this gas turbine-powered locomotive. This resulted in GE 101, or UP-50, being tested in 1949. It's still quite unique in being one of the few North American locomotives to be double-ended, the cabs resembling an Alco FA. It produced on 4 two-axle trucks, pushing out 4,500 horsepower at the wheel, and it also featured an auxiliary diesel generator that would cause the main generator to spin up the turbine. It also featured a heater to heat the fuel, which was heavy bunker C oil. When temperatures were at operating temperatures, it would swap from diesel to bunker C to power the gas turbine. Before we go any further, I feel like it's a very important thing to explain what bunker C is. The easiest way to explain it is once you refine oil, taking out petrol or gasoline, diesel, and further, bunker C is the stuff left over. Bunker C is what powers the massive oil tanker fleet or the merchant vessels. One issue with bunker fuel is that it's not very refined and it still has a lot of particulates in it. A notable one is sulfur, which has a very corrosive effect on engine parts. Another issue is, at a room-like temperature, its viscosity is the equivalent of tar and it needs to be heated to be used properly. usually being heated to about 219 Fahrenheit or 261 Fahrenheit. Despite the complications and issues, General Electric impressed Union Pacific, ordering 10 similar to the prototype but a single cab to allow for larger fuel tanks. While pulling freight between Ogden, Utah and Green River, Wyoming, and later on being expected to go on further runs, they were given new fuel tenders, which is what we have in our review later on. These gave them an extra 24,000 gallons to allow them to run to Council Bluffs, Iowa. An experiment was done with Union Pacific 57 in 1953. This was an experiment to see how they could run with propane instead of bunker C. It was a massive improvement as it didn't foul the turbine and burned very clean compared to bunker C. Now, despite the good results, it was cancelled due to the difficulty in transporting propane and just the general safety of handling propane. Now, this leads us to the second generation of gas turbines, the Verandas. Units 61 to 75 were delivered in 1954 as part of the second generation. While they looked different due to the walkways, realistically they lacked any real changes aside from the intakes being moved from the side to the roof. In 1958, UP61 was part of a multiple unit test to allow it to run with diesels. They were very successful and most of the first and second generation gas turbine were equipped with the equipment. The first and second generation GTELs were retired by June 1964, lasting only 10 years in service. Today, we will only realistically discuss the first two generations due to Athearn only making the first two generations. When I finally buy a Scale Trains one, we'll discuss the third one. Retirement was actually caused not because they stopped working, but actually because the refinement techniques in the oil industry was actually getting better. This meant that the cost of bunker C was actually A, less was being made because it got refined a lot better, and B, it got more expensive because the plastics industry started to use it. One of the other things that is quite important to actually notice, and I'll sort of go into a later review of mine, which is the U50s. One thing that you may sort of, if you've ever seen a U50, is sort of see the resemblance between the early generation of GTELs and a U50. Now, basically, this is because a lot of the basic framework and equipment got reused on when creating the U50s. What they are is basically a dual engine, similar to the Centennials and all that, except a bit smaller. Dual engines locomotives. One sad thing is none of the early gas turbines were saved from the scrapper's torch, and only the third generations have survived. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, in the history section, the tenders have actually been sort of reused for the steam excursions. So some of the 844 and 4014 big boy excursions, you'll notice the two yellow tenders. They're actually from the original gas turbines. So what we're going to do is see if the Athearn model can actually match up to this beautiful and interesting locomotive. Let's find out. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little bit of a history presentation. Well, it's one of my favorite things while doing these videos. Generally speaking, they do take a fair bit of time, so yeah. If you do enjoy them, I am doing a bit more of a history-focused one, where there's no model train involved. It's just a real thing. But yeah. So, what do we have in front of us? Well, quite simply, it's an Athearn gas turbine. Now, whether it's a ready-to-run or Genesis, it's up to you to decide. I don't think even Athearn knows, because on the box it says ready-to-roll. On the website it says Genesis. No clue why. I don't think Athearn even knows why. But take that as what you will. Generally speaking, I'm going to treat this like as a Genesis model. It comes with a Genesis price tag. And secondly, most of importantly at all, it is basically the U50 underneath. That's not a surprise. They were basically developed. The U50s were built upon the frames and all that of the actual gas turbine. So generally speaking, it's going to be very, very similar there. Now, one thing that we're going to straight away get into is it's got plenty of room. All right, you don't have to worry about things like such as, does it pull enough? Add more weight. Done. It's not like a simple other locomotive where you are struggling for weight. However, this is where it gets quite problematic, and you'll get what I mean. So looking at the wheels, right, basically the two inner trucks here are the powered ones. The ones on the outside aren't. Now, yes, it's not historical. I'm not the first one to say to yell about that. But this comes into a problem because, it's not, realistic. Generally speaking, all right, you want your locomotive to at least have as many traction motors and all that, all working. And this problem sort of leads into another thing. In real life, right, having a design like this where you have the assisting trailing and pilot trucks like this, useful. The problem is, in model railroading, kind of useless because you don't have the same load restrictions. You're not really running massive trains over bridges, and you don't really have to worry about ground pressure and all that. Now, where this becomes a problem is if you are starting a train, you are more likely to wheel slip with this one. The other problem is, because while the motor is concentrated here, there is still a fair bit of weight across the whole model, right? I'm gonna open it up so that way we can both have a look. I've already seen it, but we'll sort of get into that just so you know what to expect. Okay, I know we're sort of rushing into the actual frame and all that, but I think this is sort of where it gets quite interesting and quite important to sort of discuss. So, generally speaking, there is plenty of room. This isn't like a, like a narrow body or where, U30 or U36, where there isn't a lot of weight to be added. In this case, there's plenty. However, and actually not however, generally speaking, there is also already mounting points for twin speaker setup. So you got one here, and you got another one here. Now, as you can sort of see, the actual rear and front trucks are not powered. It's only these two. Like I mentioned, you're gonna get a bit more wheel slip just because a lot of the weight is actually distributed across the whole engine. It's not concentrated towards the middle. Yes, there's a heavy motor and the flywheels there. And well, does that help? It does. However, you really can't, no matter how good you are like this, you just can't be adding more raw weight. So if I were you, I'd personally add a bit more weight just because for, especially on the middle, because if you add it in anywhere else, you're going to really struggle actually getting that nice traction and all that. Look, I understand there are limitations of the design and all that, but personally, I would have at least liked to see the rear and front trucks to be powered. They do function as pickups, so that's really nice, but yeah, not powered. And it does make it a bit harder to actually start a train, up on a hill, or any grade, or, just starting up a grade. It does make it a little bit harder, and you are probably going to get a bit more wheel slip. Now, my layout isn't very big, and it doesn't have really any, any sort of big hills or anything like that. So, it's not going to really struggle, but if you are running a big train, especially anything above like 30 wagons or something like a 30 boxcar set, you may actually start getting wheel slip. So you are going to have to sort of like in real life, notch it up. Yeah, in terms of that, one other thing I will say is it's quite nice that. So the frame is actually decently heavy, and it does have the provisions for a, I think it's a 28mm speaker. So it's definitely got the all that, and what's beautiful is it does have an LED. So things like a, I believe it's got. Yep. So it does also have a functioning Mars light and a regular headlight there. That's actually really nice. So yeah, I will get onto the tender soon. I haven't forgotten about it, but I just thought we should at least go through that. The mechanism is actually quite the most important thing about a model train because it actually lets it run. As you can also see, there is larger capacitors, just so that way your light isn't flickering. But generally speaking, I do think that the lack of a nice of those extra powered wheels and all that, it does make it a bit harder overall. Just because in terms of running performance and all that, it does make it a bit harder to start a train. In terms of detail, you really can't fault it. You know, there's nothing I can sort of go. Generally speaking, you know, it's quite nice. It is actually a far better job than a lot of the other Therns I've reviewed. Everything is beautiful. It's nice and crisp. One other thing that I will mention is, you know, just things such as like where the rivets are, you know, just things like little panels, they're really nicely defined. And even if when we go to the side, where the walkways are, something I have noticed, and I know it sounds like a very silly thing to make a comment on, is I don't know what plastic they've used, but it does seem a little bit harder than, let's say, a lot of the other ones. Why I mention this is because it feels a lot less fragile than a lot of the other models that I've handled so far. You know, they just feel a little bit more solid. Obviously, not to the same degree as a brass one, but solid enough. You know, I really can't sort of go, you know, it's flawed there. Now, actually, in terms of other decals, such as number 71. You know, the Union Pacific is basically super crisp. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the details here are quite correct. I've had a look at even all the panels, and generally they do match up to the photographs. Now, something I will mention here is it would be the perfect candidate for weathering. Generally speaking, Bunker C is a filthy oil if you've ever had to work with. I haven't really had to work with it, but look, put it this way, if diesel's already sooty enough, can you imagine what Navy fuel is? Yeah, it really can't be good for you. So, one of the other things is, because the roof is basically identical to this Series 1, I guess, a lot of the one detail that does change is this. That is the intake. So the intake does change, and there is a tiny gap there, and just for you to be aware of, because what I've noticed is the one that I picked up, it does seem to be a bit loose. Personally, I will actually stick it down with maybe some super glue, just because, look, it would just be a nice experience just to do it that way. So we go to the rear. As you can expect, there is no headlights or marker lights from my understanding. Actually, I do take that back. Actually, it does have a single marker light, I believe. I'm not too familiar, but I do believe it's a single marker light. I had a quick double check of the chassis, and yes, there is an LED to light up this. I'm not exactly sure what it is for, though. Generally speaking, a lot of these never always ran with their whatchamacallit, with their tenders, and we'll get to that. But yeah, there is an actual, I believe, marker light or headlight. I'm not too sure. So yeah, one other thing I forgot to actually mention. So, and this is something I just wanted to double check, which is typical Athearn. Your number boards do not light up. Now, yes, that is actually quite disappointing. And you know, I just don't know why. You know, when you pay Athearn sort of money, you know, you just don't get things like number boards or anything like that, because I like running things in the dark, right? I think it's really cool. What sucks is somebody going, nah, you can't do that, you know, because, you know, things are missing, such as your number boards, right? And when you pay Athearn money, you deserve lit number boards. And I've double checked, right, the new ones, because this is a, you know, super new. I've double checked. Nope, no update there. That is really disappointing, you know. It's something I've actually been really disappointed about Athearn's, for some strange reason, not to do full lighting, right? I don't care about the red marker lights. Give me number boards. Proto 2000 could give me lit number boards. Was it amazing? No, it wasn't. But at least it was there, right? At least try. So if I do want to do number boards, I've got to do it myself. Which, can I do it? Yes. But why should I? You know, and why should you, to be honest? Why should you pay all this money to not get working number board? And also, I know this is, you know, I'm really getting into a bit of, I don't like Athearn because they do take shortcuts. This is a shortcut. Why are you getting plastic couplers on a premium model? And I will call this a premium model. They charge it like a premium model. So if you want to charge that sort of money, you got to justify it. And bluntly here, yeah. Yep, it's not there. Because looking at the brand new ones, it's $264 US. That's with the slab siders, but they're basically identical in power and all that. Why do they just, yeah, why do they give you plastic couplers? Right, there's like, does Athearn hate KD couplers, or like, do they break up really toxically? Like some high school parent, give me KDs. Why do I need to do this? If I'm paying you the money, do it. Right? It's a very easy job to do. So do it straight from the factory. Why do I need to pay an extra $15 to put in KDs myself? Right? It shouldn't be like this on a premium Genesis model, you know? Right over. Let's go on to just a few more details overall, what I want to sort of discuss. Generally, the truck detail is actually quite nice. It's a nice silver, it looks pretty accurate. Realistically, they're never going to be that silver. It's a freight locomotive. You know, the shop crew do not care about your silverness of the bogies that much, okay? Yeah, they don't care that much. So, moving back to the back, you can sort of see, generally, you know, how thin a lot of the details are, things like the handrails. I mean, I do have to double check that, you know, everything's sort of painted right, but generally speaking, yeah, everything seems like the right color, and there's nothing I would say, you know, is really out of place, or I would be chalking up to Athearn being lazy. Generally speaking, it's a good model. Now let's move to the tender. So, the tender. Now, this isn't the same as the ones that you get on scale trains. Yeah, they just so the ones on the scale trains are made for the Series 3 of the gas turbines. From my understanding, they're quite a different design. But yeah. So, you are able to buy these separately, I believe. I mean, it could be. I have seen them on sale. I mean, it could be people sort of selling them separately. But they do sort of exist even today because these were just extremely useful just to bring around, I mean, you might not necessarily need to put bunker fuel in it, but it would be useful for things like water and all that. A lot of them have been converted to be used for like extra like excursion tenders for like 844 and 4014. Just because, they're useful, they're cold water, they're good enough. One other thing to also mention is, from my understanding, the bogies do not pick up, right? It seems like you might, because, as you can sort of see, there is a plug. At first, I thought, it allowed the tender to be used as pickups, but I haven't really seen any evidence of it so far. There's no wires, no nothing like that. So, yeah, take that as what you will. However, what the plug is actually there for is the rear headlight. The headlight that's actually supposed to be fixed onto the tender. It's matching tender, it's got UP71, so that's pretty cool. Generally speaking, the walkway is actually pretty well done. As you can sort of see, the actual meshing is actually very, very fine. And honestly, that is a very well done job. I can't fault it for that. I'll fault Genesis for a lot of things. Right. I try and look. I honestly, I do try and be honest about things on my channel. And even if a third paid me like $500,000 tomorrow to go, yeah, this train is good, I'd still say, you gotta do something about the couplers. It's still ridiculous. Yeah, things like the ladder, very fine, very nice looking. Things like your brake wheel are nicely done. Now the wire, as you can sort of see, leads into the tender. It's a little bit of a small one, and it clips just where it's a very hard spot to see. So if you are clumsy or anything like that, personally, I would permanently couple these, just because it's gonna be a pain, and I would be even afraid of myself accidentally pulling on the actual wires too much. I've done it once with a Broadway. I don't want to ever do it again. But yeah, honestly, I'm actually pretty happy with this. Look, there are some things I'm irritated about, like the number boards and the actual couplers and all that. Yes, the couplers I can easily fix with a trip to the hobby shop, and I probably will. It's just disappointing to see. But the actual detail on the model is pretty solid, right? But yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I do recommend. Well, it's a little bit hard, right? Now, as much as I would like to say I'd recommend it, it makes no difference because generally speaking, if you want a veranda gas turbine, it is this or an overland model. And generally speaking, an overland model is very expensive. So you're going to pick this. So the question is, do you really want a gas turbine? And if you do, I think this is a perfectly decent model. If you aren't in the market for a gas turbine and you want something that looks quite different, I still would recommend this. It's a reasonably affordable premium model, and it's quite large. It comes with its nice tender, and it comes with a very nice box. It's a very nice locomotive. The mechanism could be a little bit more desired from, but in my opinion, I think it's pretty good, right? The colors are actually very good. All the finer details, are there where you expect them to be, and actually quite nicely in detail as well. Yeah, I just think it's a really nice model, especially if you are into getting more collector's items. While this has sort of been around for a bit for ages, I do think it sort of lends itself to being unique enough that while you might not necessarily be into the Union Pacific, I do think these are, interesting enough and good enough to justify, a non-Union Pacific fan to buy them. I think they're, I just think they're pretty neat. So, do give me your opinions if you are interested in getting one of these. I certainly am. I'm tempted to maybe get the slab-sided one just because I've seen, videos of these ones running with big boys and all. So I'm pretty excited to at least maybe do that one day when I have a massive house. I'm not even sure a regular size house is big enough to do stuff like that. But yeah, I think that would be really fun doing a big boy and one of these together running. It's super cool. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for my to my supporters, my subscribers, and to the lovely viewers. And I just want to say thank you for my family and friends who are supporting me with this. One other thing to mention is, just tell me what you think of these. I like them. And we'll just leave it at that. I think hopefully you had a very nice day and happy railroading. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.